This is Isaac Roller of Dreamtown Comics, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to a special edition of the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's May 16th, 2021. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. These podcasts are published to celebrate the exhibitors of this year's virtual edition of the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. TCAF is an annual event gathering comic book creators from around the world to promote broad and diverse voices towards the betterment of the medium of comics through panels, keynote exclusives, and just basically enjoying the fun of comics. On this episode, I chat with Isaac Roller about Transmissions From Dreamtown at TCAF 2021. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Based in New York City, Isaac is the author of Transmissions From Dreamtown, an anthology of short stories set in the dreams of the 21st century megacity. He has released 3 volumes to date. Release of the 4th will coincide with TCAF 2021. He also puts out a bi-weekly diary comic which will soon be anthologized by Know Nothing magazine. Other works have been published in Milk and Honey Comics, Know Nothing magazine, and online on the Rumpus. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Isaac Roller about Transmissions From Dreamtown at TCAF 2021. So, Isaac Roller, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, I appreciate your time. What I normally do to start off the interview is ask the creator about their first comic books. I'm wondering if you remember, what was the first comic book that you read?
Well, I actually learned to read with Calvin and Hobbes.
Hey, that's pretty cool.
And I skipped the big words at first. I think there were words that I just knew to skip until I was like 10 or 11 years old, and I finally figured out what they meant.
Wow. Yeah, that's a cool book for sure. Bill Watterson is a great influence. Even with just looking at the pictures, you get something out of it. So
yeah, he's a great draftsman.
Good stuff. Yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned, Bill Watterson is a great influence, but I'm wondering who influences your work today?
Well, I'm not just saying this because you're based out of Toronto, but I really like Michael DeForge. Sammy Alwani up there is pretty cool. The whole kind of small press, like DIY, like zine culture, is kind of, I feel like the most exciting work is happening there. But I'll read anything.
Okay.
I'm kind of an omnivore when it comes to comics.
All right, very good. Are you more into, as they say in the French, bande dessinée, like the real life type of story?
No, not necessarily. I think I tend to gravitate towards things that feel like they come out of real life a little bit, but have a sort of a fantastical element, maybe like magical realism.
Okay, that's cool. Fair enough. So we're here talking about the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. With that in mind, I'm wondering if you have any favorite convention or festival moments that you may have attended in the past.
Well, this is actually my first.
Wow, okay. Sorry, it's virtual.
Well, I have been wanting to do one forever, I guess. When I was a teenager, my sister actually struck up a correspondence with Harvey Pekar.
That's pretty cool.
They wrote him a letter.
Yeah.
And he invited us to go to the San Francisco Comic-Con.
Wow.
And we went and said hi at his booth. So that was pretty memorable.
I bet. Wow. Yeah, I haven't been to that one before, but I hear it's pretty cool.
It was more of the like superhero type
Ah,
Comic Con,
okay.
but a good time was had nonetheless.
Sure, good stuff.
And I sort of crashed Comic Arts Brooklyn in 2019.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had just put out my first issue of Dreamtown, and uh, was thinking the whole time I will definitely have a booth here next year.
Okay.
Little did I know.
Little did you know. Yeah.
Yeah, 6 months
Well,
later.
well, I'm sure you'll get there someday. Something to look forward to, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
I hope so.
Absolutely. So we're here talking about your latest project that you're exhibiting at TCAF. Wonder if you could talk a bit about it and maybe the origins of the book as well.
So I actually have two books premiering at
Cool.
TCAF.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One is the fourth issue of Transmissions from Dreamtown, which is sort of an ongoing anthology series. Each book is different. They're short stories. They're kind of in that area I was talking about of grounded in real life, but then they also have a fantastical element. Um, the book that's premiering this festival, number four, is it's one main story and four shorter stories, and they're all about aliens. That's
Oh, okay.
the theme. But it's not, it's not exactly your typical sci-fi adventure. Um, and then the other book I'm premiering is called My Plague Year, and it's a small collection of diary comics that I kept starting right in March 2020 when the lockdown happened.
Ah, okay. Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to, I guess the initial thought was thinking that even in lockdown, like life goes on. So I would just take little bits and pieces of experiences I had, and I would make a 3-panel comic out of them.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Mm-hmm.
and then as time went on and history, you know, continued, and sort of like the racial justice protests started up, and there were all these things happening. So I felt like I should like document everything, and I continued with that three panel format. Um, and I did one every day from March until June.
Did you use this as an outlet? Do you think to get through it, or did you actually want to like capture the moment as it existed in time?
Um, I mean, I think a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
These I posted on Instagram, whereas my other work, I work on it for a long time, and then I print it, and then I hand it out, and it's like very alone. This was the diary comics were a way to connect with people,
Ah, okay.
um, because I would have people read them and responding immediately, and I just sometimes I felt like I needed to document a perspective that maybe I would have that someone else wouldn't have, or a perspective that could get lost as we like moved away from that weird moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but sometimes I just wanted to like make people laugh with
Right.
what was going on right
Right.
there,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that like shared experience that was really stressful.
Yeah, I asked a creator the other day this type of question about whether in the future we'll look back and people write about this time period. Um, I don't think in a similar way as 9/11, but certainly as a historical moment. I'm wondering if it's something that we'll look back on and write about, or will we just try to ignore it and move on with our lives? I don't know if that's a
Uh,
fair question to ask you, but I just wanted to get your opinion.
yeah, well, I mean, I think it would be interesting to ask that of a lot of,
Mm,
historians, psychologists, people
right.
like that too. But just as a cartoonist, yeah, I think this will kind of uh, lay like a layer of sediment on the like foundation of the collective psyche.
Right.
That
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
I think this is going to kind of define an era.
Right. Yeah. 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 No, I appreciate that. Want to switch gears completely now and,
Okay.
and talk about the tools that you use to create your work. I'm wondering if you're a more of a traditional or digital user artist.
Yeah, so pretty much traditional all
Mm-hmm.
the way if I can. Um, the Dreamtown comics, I do like midtones on an iPad. Um, but I like that you still get sort of a little bit of the hand in there. And then I do all the like black lines in ink on Bristol board.
Ah, okay.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then the diary comics I do all by hand with watercolor. I have a
Oh,
beautiful
okay.
watercolor set from Japan, um,
Mm-hmm.
and then with black ink over that microns.
Okay. Is it because you haven't found anything comparable the digital format yet?
Um, I mean, yeah, I would maybe make the switch sometimes just to save time. Comics is super labor intensive,
Mm-hmm.
and anything that can help with that is nice. But there's no real comparison to the feeling of like actually doing something in the physical world.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, I was wondering because you said you were working on that regular sort of diary, and you were
Mm.
saying you're using watercolor. That must have been a bit of a demand to create something on a regular basis, was it not? Or did you find it just flowed easily?
Um, in terms of the material, they're sort of halfway between gouache and watercolor.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's a Japanese brand called Gansai Tambe. I probably not pronouncing that right. And they're pretty. I can like lay them down pretty well. I've always used watercolor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if you mean more like coming up with stuff, that
Well, yeah, that's another story too. The
right.
idea is one thing, but to get your ideas down on paper on a regular basis to effectively capture the moment that you're trying to convey. I guess that would be the pressure because I talk to people who do web comics, for example, and for the most part they do use digital just because of the
Right.
regular sort of basis that they have to publish. So I was just curious about watercolor being the most useful tool for you, and it seems like it comes naturally. So makes sense.
Um, yeah, it was nice. I definitely, not every Instagram post was the best picture that could have been taken of it. Printing up this book, I kind of realized that it was a bit of work to digitalize them.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I would do it. I found it very relaxing and cathartic, and then I would put them on Instagram, and it was nice to have that like immediacy, even if those pictures I was taking weren't like in their best digital form.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sure. No, I get that. I get that for sure. So typically at conventions, people will come up to various creators and ask about hints and tips for creating comic books. I'm wondering if someone were to come up to you, what advice would you give to them if they want to make their own comic book or graphic novel, or for that matter, web comic?
I guess that the drawings don't have to be very good. They just have to be very comic-y. Do you know what I mean? Like
Uh, could you
you
explain that a
have
bit
to
more? Yeah.
um that like getting something exactly how it looks like isn't as important as the drawings moving the reader through the story.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Now I understand. Right. Makes sense.
Uh,
Sure.
very sequential, I guess is what
Mm-hmm.
I mean.
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, good, good, good. So you talked a bit about your projects that you're showing off at TCAF. I'm wondering if you can talk about what's next for you. What do you have coming up down the road that you can talk about?
Yeah, so I will do probably at least one more Dreamtown and get back into the diary comics for a bit. But my girlfriend and I just bought a piece of property with a cabin in it, and we're thinking of building another cabin on the property and turning it into an art residency.
Nice. Pretty cool.
And so this probably won't be for a few years down the road, but once it's up and running, cartoonists are definitely encouraged to apply.
Sounds like a plan for sure. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So typically at conventions, it's not only about meeting people and chatting, but it's also about buying books. So I'm wondering, where do you recommend people go to buy your books?
They can go on my website, isaac-roller.com. There's a shop page on there. They can buy the collection of diary comics through the publisher, Know Nothing Publishing. I believe their website is knownothingzine.com. And lastly, if they're in the New York area, they can go to Desert Island Comics in Williamsburg, which I highly recommend going to, even if not to buy my book.
Thanks to Isaac for the chat. You can discover more about Isaac online at isaac-roller.com. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts, and please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2021.